What is up, Los Angeles, and welcome out to the latest episode of the Bruin Bible. Madman, it felt so good to say that once again for the LA Football Network. You guys requested him, man. We had to bring him on the show. You may remember we had him, I think, in the 2022 season. My main man, Ryan Ramoneda, I've been keeping tabs on my boy, was coaching high school football. We get into it on Twitter every now and then talking about the beloved UCLA Bruins and maybe a future sheriff coming out here soon. My main man, Ryan Ramoneda, in the building, the man with all the sources. How are we doing on this Wednesday night when the UCLA Bruins just wrapped up spring football?
Will and Madman, I just want to say thank you guys for having me on again. I know it's been a while, and Will, last time it was just you and I. So, Jamal, an honor to be on your show. Seriously. Appreciate you guys having me.
Thrilled to have you, Ryan. Thrilled to have you. This is going to be a great conversation. And just thank you, first of all, for being such a gem in the UCLA Bruin Nation and the ecosystem. And so we're really thrilled to have you and have a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, no, I'm excited.
It's going to be a lot of fun, brother. We have a lot to catch up on as it's been such a long time. But you were one of the first people when the Mokiao-Atimalala situation was coming to hold. I know you tweeted out a couple of eyeballs, and I'm like, but my guy Ryan knows something is going on here. Lo and behold, we all heard the smoke, the steam that was coming from the situation. We land the number one quarterback in the transfer portal in Nico. When did you hear about this, and when were you serious about, hey, this guy could be leading the Bruins out of the tunnel week one against Utah in the first week?
Yeah, I am lucky, just to kind of backtrack to what you said at the intro, to know some people that give me some good info. So it's not like I'm going to the practices like some of you guys that are in the media and doing all that kind of stuff. I did go to the Friday Night Lights last year the first time, but I was invited by a secret guest and had a blast, took my dad. So I kind of just networked and met some people that were able to just kind of confide in me some information, and they don't necessarily want to be active on social media and explaining all kinds of stuff. So they give me that info and they kind of use me as a mouthpiece, and that's just kind of how things roll. Thank you to those people. It's really fun being a part of the community. And I know UCLA gets kind of crapped on sometimes for supposedly not having fans or not being super active on social media or whatever, because, it's UCLA. They got a whole bunch of stuff going on around there. But we are active. We do exist. And some of us have some sources. And I knew probably, within 3-4 days of him leaving Tennessee in that whole debacle, that they were serious contenders. I just didn't know money-wise how it was going to work out. And I just understood that he didn't really have anywhere to go. I know that UNC was probably a closer player in it than most people would think. But once they went after Gio Lopez, he kind of fit more of the type and the profile that Belichick clearly wanted. So kind of a veteran guy. But coming back home, his family's out here. They grew up around here, obviously recruited Madden, his younger brother. So the ties just kind of made sense. And in my opinion, honest opinion, I think that it might be something that kind of just fell into UCLA's lap. And I think that it might even be divine intervention, because we've been beaten over the head for the last, I'm 30 years old and I haven't really seen anything great other than like the Brett Hundley years. So maybe it's a little bit of God stepping in and placing something in our lap that might help propel things forward. Let's say that.
No, absolutely, Ryan. It's so funny you mentioned that, right? I'm a little older than you, and so my fondest memories were the McNown years, and then that drought up until Hundley, and now we're hoping for that renaissance. And sort of to that point of that renaissance, Ryan, Deshaun Foster, right? I mean, Bruin through and through, very unprecedented, unique circumstances of him becoming the head coach last spring, February, March timeframe, jumping from running backs coach all the way to the head man. But you can tell this is sort of a calling for him. He wants to be here 20 years and really wants to revive UCLA in the best ways possible. Your initial impressions of the first 15 months of the Deshaun Foster tenure, what was sort of your initial reaction when he got the job? How has that, if any, evolved over time, and what is your expectation of how this tenure is going to go moving forward?
Yeah, it's a good question. When first things got kickstarted with him taking the position and Chip kind of screwing us with the timing that he left, don't get me started on that. But Deshaun, obviously the press conference at the Big Ten Media Day threw like the whole nation for a loop. But if you've been around UCLA football and you've ever seen him talk, like you just know that he's a soft-spoken dude. You know, he doesn't like talking to the media all that much. So it is what it is. And I thought people overreacted, and his joke, it was clearly meant to be a joke, and it didn't land about being in LA. So it is what it is. And ever since then, I was kind of doing some groundwork in regards to kind of defending him. You know, he is a legend, and I didn't really get to see him play because I was too young, but I know how important he is at the fan base and how much he cares about being at the school. So I think he's only made really good progress so far. It's only been a short stint, but with the way that he's been attacking recruiting differently, especially locally at the local high schools. I mean, even when I was coaching in high school last year, we had a couple guys come to our school a few times. So I know that they're out and about, and it doesn't just have to be in the LA area, but, you know, the Inland Empire and stuff, they're out and about all the time. So he's definitely attacking the local recruits, and he wants to keep that talent home, which is a big deal. But the biggest thing for me, I think, was the way that the team played last year. I'm going to be completely honest. I think they were devoid of a lot of talent. I know we had a few draft picks this year, but they were mostly on the defensive side. And our defensive coordinator did a hell of a job. But I think that you could see that the way the team rallied around their coach, and you can tell that the way that they responded, because they started, was it 0-5 or 1-5?
1-5. Yep.
4. Yeah.
4, 1-5, something like that. I just know it wasn't good, but you know, they almost rallied to within bowl eligibility range. So I mean, they played really well down the stretch. I remember coming home Friday night and after one of my high school games that we coached, and just being super excited to watch the Iowa game, because I just saw the stats, I saw the full box score, and I saw that we kind of kicked their ass. And I was like, well, wait a second, this is the kind of team that can show up to your place and run it down your throat. And they had that great running back that was just taken by the Steelers too, and we just took it to him. He had his worst game of the year. So those are that, and then the Nebraska game, you know, going up there, hostile environment, freshman 5-star, 100,000 people, you shut them up. And I thought that was a really big deal going forward, and kind of catapulted the rest of the season. Now, obviously, it didn't finish the way that we wanted, but I think it bodes well going forward, especially in a tough conference like the Big Ten, because if you can get to that middle ground of being about the 7th or 8th best team, you can pick off one of those top 4 or 5 teams, maybe for one win, and then you really start juicing up the recruiting, see yourself in the top quadrant.
Yeah, that's a great response to the Deshaun start of the era. And I think, to his credit, the Bieniemy OC hire was not working, you know, coming into this year. He quickly pivoted. You know, he gets Tino Sinceri, who we got to see against Indiana. At the time, the Indiana loss felt like it was the end of the world for UCLA football, because you look historically at what Indiana is as a program out of there. Little did we know they were going to make the college football playoff, and Sinceri was going to be a huge part of them doing that. So I give him a ton of credit for pivoting, for learning, for making the effort that Chip did not, getting out in the community, recruiting, making plays. I mean, the famous story is Mason Graham as a top 5 pick in the NFL draft this year. His dream school was UCLA. He wanted to come. We just didn't give him the time of day, and ultimately he chose Michigan, and it all worked out for him. But that guy was born to be in the blue and gold. But when it comes to the transfer portal, the recruiting, you can just feel this guy wants to get UCLA on the right foot. You know, whether it delivers or not this year in terms of the win column, he's doing the little things. Like, if you would have told me we'd have a better transfer portal class and that team across town, I don't know if I would have believed that coming into this offseason. You get the number 1 quarterback in Nico. You get the number 1 running back in JV and Thomas. We made the joke we've got like 10 defensive backs for UCLA. Like, only 5 are going to get out there with a nickel coming on the field. Talk to me about the early returns on this transfer portal class, because not only is he connecting with the high schools, but the transfer portal results speak for themselves, Ryan.
Yeah, definitely. They addressed they completely retooled and rehauled that defensive back room, which I think is a really big deal, especially with
O-line too.
Yep, the O-line is from everything that I've seen, I mean, they're massive, you know. So I think it's some dudes that probably want to prove that they're worth starting roles, you know. And we needed to just get new bodies in there. I know we had some transfers out that were some freshmen, sophomores that were kind of just experimental kids that were probably shouldn't have been, God bless them, on the roster because they were Chip holdovers. And they'll probably kill it wherever they go. But the reality is that we needed some veteran experience, some guys that can throw some weight around, that are really 6'6", you get off the bus and they look like they can play the part. So I really think that the transfer class ended up shaping up pretty well. I know that they just addressed defensive end in the last week or so with a couple different players, Anthony Jones from Michigan State, and Bennett from Michigan. So I know Jones. I think these are the kind of guys that were underutilized at larger programs, maybe even recruited over. And I think that they're the kind of guys that they have the ability to be on the field, but they would have been in the 2-3 deep at another school, whereas they can probably rotate into the 1 and 2 somewhere like UCLA and really becoming impact players, because that's probably our best bet, getting those kind of guys first, kind of upping their stock in regards to whether it's a draft stock or something like that, playing for a defensive coordinator like the one that we have, or if you look at Roderick Pleasant, somebody that I really wanted out of high school, local kid, big time prospect. I know I saw your tweets about how fast he is, literally one of the fastest dudes in the country. So I know he's a little bit on the smaller side, but a developmental piece that, homegrown. Now you get to build him there and coach him with a new coach in the defensive backs room, and hopefully start funneling in some more local talent because of the success that he might have on the field. Obviously, Nico speaks for himself. I have to say, most excited about Javion Thomas.
Mm.
I think he's gonna kill it. Now we have to see how the O-line shapes up, what the starters look like, and the run scheme in the new offense. Obviously, last year we couldn't run the ball, but I think a combo of him and Berger, maybe even Frias. I know he was getting some pretty good reps during spring ball, so I think that's a pretty good 3 deep running back room. But I definitely expect Thomas and Berger to get the bulk of the load.
Yeah, Ryan, such a great point. And, you touched on, the roster a bit and guys that, you've got your eye on. What do you think is a reasonable expectation for 2025? Will and I talked a bunch the last couple of weeks and said, look, pre-Nico, this felt like maybe 5 to 7 wins, floor of 5, maybe a ceiling of 7, depending on how things bounce, injuries, whatnot. Nico feels like he gets you +2, just in terms of what he's potentially capable of. And we're looking at maybe 7 to 9. How do you see, next year play out? Like, are we, on another planet thinking 7 to 9? What's your take on that? And B, being in the Big Ten, we saw it last year, Clemson, we saw it with, some 9-3 teams that you're either going to get in potentially, or you're flirting with the playoff at 9-3 in one of these 2 big conferences. What needs to happen this year for the ball to bounce our way, everything to kind of break right, potentially a 9-3 season college football playoff appearance?
Sure. I don't think you guys are crazy for the 7 to 9 range at all. I know Vegas probably, I think updated was still 5.5. I'm sure that'll change over time. It always does. I would expect it to be around 6. But in my opinion, it starts with that week 1 game against Utah. So I know they've got Dampier from New Mexico, and if you guys had a chance to watch him at New Mexico, he can flat out play. He is really, really good. Still working on his throwing a bit, but he is an incredible athlete. So if we can shut Utah down, we got them at home this year. You want to take advantage of that home and home. Having them opener, maybe a little bit more juice, a little bit more fans in the stands. Hopefully it's not too hot. I think that's kind of the tone setter there, because then you're going to UNLV after that. Dan Mullen's the head coach. You should have a talent advantage against Utah, hypothetically, and then you should definitely have a talent advantage at UNLV. So new head coach, Dan Mullen, it'll be exciting, but it's going to be a large stage, Allegiant, stadium. It's going to be probably a ton of UCLA fans with the opportunity to go to Allegiant for the first time. I know I'll probably try to go. Then you got New Mexico at home, which you should obviously win. So I really think that 3-0 is on the table there. Even if you come out 2-1, as long as the loss isn't to one of the group of 5 schools, you're probably okay. We'll win at Northwestern to open Big Ten play. Pretty doable, right? That stadium by the lake, not a lot of people there. Going to be cold and windy, but just handle business. They do have one of the least talented rosters in the conference, so you should be able to bully them a bit. And then it really kind of just boils down to the Penn State game at home, the Maryland game at home, and then at Indiana. Indiana's going to be tough. Obviously, they took it to us last year. They really did just bully us, and I don't think that we were expecting that. But then again, the whole nation wasn't expecting that. So now you have a chip on your shoulder to play a school like Indiana, who was an afterthought in football to begin with, and now they were in the playoffs. So if Indiana can do it, why can't you? Now we didn't get a bunch of James Madison transfers, but there's still that, that lingering feeling in the back of your mind that you can make some kind of a run like they did because they proved that it's possible. I think you have to poach. You have to pick off one of the bigger schools. I don't think you're going to win at Ohio State, but never say never. But if you can beat Penn State at home in a slobber knocker because they don't travel well, they haven't been to the Rose Bowl in a couple years, they've never played UCLA at the Rose Bowl. James Franklin teams can be kind of weird. You just never know, right? So you got a full stadium there, full momentum. I could see 9 wins on the schedule. It does come down to Washington at home, which I think you need to hold serve against, and then USC on the road. And I don't know what to expect from USC. I know Vegas isn't very high on them. I know our buddy Josh Pate, whose show I love watching, he's big on the vibes at USC, but you know me, I'm a USC hater. So I like when their vibes are up because that usually means that they're going to do terribly. So it does boil down to, I think, that Washington game at home and the Penn State. If you can grab even 2 of those, but for sure, obviously the Washington game. And if you can steal a win against Penn State, really establish yourself as a contender in the Big Ten, at least in the top portion, I think you can get that 8th win.
I love it, man. Yeah, I was about to bring up, I just want to beat Jed Fish once in our entire life. Look at what he did the last few years at Arizona. That was a guy I wanted for the head coaching job when it was rumored Chip was going to leave. And you see what he's starting to build at Washington. I mean, they got this quarterback up there, Damon Williams, who looks like he's like a Kyler Murray-esque type of quarterback that he's going to be taking over there. So just to be Jed Fish once would be like the icing on the cake for this UCLA football season. I want to turn to the trenches because, with the Big Ten, it's known as a conference that has the offensive and defensive lines. You think of, the Boza brothers at Ohio State or Joe Thomas at Wisconsin up there. They really addressed the offensive line after last year, where to me, it was one of the worst units in the Power 3. There's no way around it. We had one of the worst run games in the country last year. And, love or hate Garbers, I never thought the criticism was fair with him because the offensive line wouldn't give him enough time. I mean, the plays he made against Nebraska and Rutgers, he's running for his life for 50 yards because that's what he had to do to move the football down the field. So I want to get your interpretation on how the offensive line has been built up. And then just the second part of this question is Okaika Malloy. When D'Anton Lynn left to USC, it stung a little bit more because we finally figured out that defensive piece. He goes to the Trojans, and you're just kind of like, man, are we ever going to address the defense ever again? Malloy steps in, and you see what he did with Carson Schwessinger and Jay Toia, who I thought it was crazy. He was a 7th-round pick because Jamal and I talked about it. He may have been the most important player on the defense last year in terms of opening those gaps up for the likes of Kane and Carson last year. Malloy's going to have his hands full this year with some of those edge rushers and DeVilliers, Anthony Jones, these type of guys that have ability but haven't really put pen to paper in terms of production. What are your thoughts on Malloy, and what are your thoughts on the retooling of the offensive line, if you will?
Yeah, so Malloy's awesome, man. I remember that he had said that, and I forgot which game it was, but I believe it was last season after one of their losses, maybe the Oregon game, but he said that I remember he was crying in response to, being embarrassed, not just like for the fans, but for the players, because he felt like he didn't prepare them enough. And he's all in, man. His energy is awesome. The whole trip to Hawaii and him being there with his family and stuff and his Hawaiian pride, that was really cool. But you can see that there's a level of buy-in from the players on defense that they really love him. So, for Lynn to walk and go across town. Yeah. Obviously that rubbed us all the wrong way, but you got somebody here that kind of, stepped into the role, and deservedly so. I think Chip did a good job talent evaluating him as an up-and-coming coach. And he's somebody that when rumors were circulating about him leaving after that Boise State bowl win, I believe it was Washington, his alma mater, that was possibly looking to poach him. We were all fearful because we saw what kind of talent he was as a coach and the way the players respond to him. So I'm excited to see the retooled defensive back room. Obviously, the linebacker room is gonna take a bit of a hit, but I believe Chisholm, especially from Oregon State, is going to be a dude that I think can step right in, freshman All-American, and really play well as a linebacker in that defense. The D-line is, I think, pretty decent in regards to the actual interior. We should have Gary Smith coming back, Keanu Williams, And then the defensive ends, we'll see. I know Busic actually ended up putting his name in the portal, so I don't know if he's going to end up leaving, but he may have been somebody that fell out of that top 2 rotation and was just kind of a guy that was in it last year because of the depth. So he just makes it work, man. I'm really proud that he's our defensive coordinator, and I'm excited to see what he can do, especially with the way that they've been recruiting better, younger talent on that side of the ball. In regards to the O-line, like I said earlier, I mean, they're just way bigger this time. I think some of the biggest pieces that we got, the one that I'm most excited for is Eugene Brooks from Oklahoma. Yes. I think he's a bona fide, like, 50
he was like a top 100 recruit,
Yeah, I think he's like a bona fide 40, 50 game starter if he can stay healthy and develop. I'd like to see him in there in that rotation, maybe even ahead of some of those seniors at some point this season. But obviously, I'm not making those decisions, so we'll see how he develops. But I'm most excited for him. I know Julian Armilla from Florida State, another massive body. Cortland Ford going to be competing for an offensive tackle position with Unije, who I believe is coming back from injury. So, and then you have DeGiorgio coming back. Should be Sam Yoon as well, right at the center position. So that's a lot. Yeah, he did a really good job stepping up last year. Obviously, the run schemes are going to have to change. I was not a fan of the way that Bieniemy ran the offense, and Garbers, despite all of his failures, he ended up putting up really good passing numbers overall, despite being injured half the time too. So I think we've got great weapons on the outside. The receivers. I think that's probably our most talented group. And now we just got to put it all together, see what Tino can put together for us.
Yeah, Ryan. And I'll leave you with this. I mean, speaking of Tino, what is your thoughts on Sunseri in his system, given the roster and the personnel that we have? We saw it last year. Obviously, Cignetti and the Hoosiers were the darling of college football in the story. Curtis Rourke, had a phenomenal season, got the ball out quick, moved the chains, very timing-oriented offense, relied on some bigger receivers to be able to kind of create separation. When you look at this team and you look at Nico and what he was able to do at Tennessee, and you look at Gilmer and you look at Mikey Matthews and you look at TMA and you talked about Javion Thomas and this offensive line, what's the biggest change that you're looking for offensively from last year schematically?
Well, what we scored a few touchdowns on last year with our running backs that worked, that we just went away from, were screens.
Yeah.
I think throwing screens, simple, quick developing plays, RPOs. I mean, it was so our offense last year was so old school West Coast. You need 6 seconds in the pocket. Like, that's just not realistic, especially when you're playing in the Big Ten and you got all these crazy edge rushers from Ohio State and all these other dudes. Like, you got to get the ball out quick. And that's something that Indiana did really well last year too. They played the pass to open up the run. So they were a really good running team because they've got the ball out quick in the passing game. And because of Tino's coaching and his ability to coach quarterbacks, I think he turned Curtis Rourke into a really, really effective quarterback in the quick passing game, which also opens up the deep threat, but it opens up the running game. And that's the most important part. And if you can run the ball, you can chew the clock. If you're chewing the clock, running the ball and throwing quick completions and you're chewing that clock, you're going to be in every game, especially if you have an even above average defense. So I think that's the biggest issue that I had last year. And Garbers took some deep shots and he had pretty good touch, but for the most part, he did have some receivers banged up too. I know Titus was hurt and or ineligible for other reasons. Yeah, Rico was pretty much gone all year. Poor Sturdivant, we wasted the hell out of him, and I'll miss him dearly. I'll be rooting for him. But, we have multiple options at the receiver position now. I think it's just gonna depend on him opening up the run game with the pass game. And I think that as long as he and Nico are in the same are on the same page, as long as Nico comes in, I know he's a stud, 5-star transfer, local kid. If he comes in with a chip on his shoulder, really wanting to sling it and even up his draft stock, because he should be draft eligible after next season, right? So let's just assume he's a 1-year rental because he did have the red shirt year. He needs to put up crazy numbers. He wants to look great. We're going to have tons of eyeballs on us. You do that by opening up with the passing game. And I think that if Nico has that level of buy-in with Tino can develop him into something special this season. Not only will it help recruiting, but in the short term, it's going to open up the run game and the running backs and all the lanes are going to open up.
Yeah, man. And you get the quarterback position right, it can cover up a lot of holes in the game of football. And I like the point you made about the screen passes and how we need to get that going. From my experience watching some of the practices this spring, it seems like Anthony Frias is kind of that guy. They'll be throwing a lot of screen passes to him out in the open field. He had the 50-yard touchdown in the Friday Night Lights game off of a little, pass right there in the flat for him. I was wondering
if only Ryan was the offensive coordinator last year for poor Keegan Jones. Somewhere Keegan Jones is crying based on Ryan's answer just now.
Oh man, when we were talking about Sturdivant coming back, Madman with Nico. Imagine Keegan with Tino Sinceri coming back. That breaks my heart as well, man. But Ryan, you've been such an awesome guest, man. I just got one more question for you before we get on out of here.
Sure.
Give me 3 players you are most excited about, not named Nico, not named Javion, coming into next season for UCLA that will help us reach that ceiling of between 7 and 9 wins on paper that we're predicting here.
Somebody that flashed last year as a true freshman, which is hard to do as a starter, is Quasi. Quasi is a baller. He is really, really good. Super good talent. I mean, he caught contested balls, fading away, sliding. He was awesome. So I'm really excited for him. I think if he can solidify himself as like a bona fide wide receiver 1, I think it's just going to open things up for Carter Shaw, who's just a really silky smooth route runner, and then Rico, who's a deep threat. And then on top of that, I'm really looking forward to Isaiah Chisholm from Oregon State. I watched his tape. I thought he was really, really good. I thought that's one of the more underrated gets in the portal. And then probably for the backfield, well, no. Okay, yeah, probably Cole Martin.
Nice.
I know that.
Yeah.
He's got something to him. He's a really good player, but he's also got that, that coach's son mentality where he's going to be there and holding other people accountable because his dad's there, and he's happy to be home. He really is, and I follow a lot of these kids on socials and I see what they post and stuff, and he's having the time of his life coming back home, and he's representing UCLA well. So I'd say those are probably my 3. We'll see where they end up sticking him. And then honorable mention, maybe Benjamin Perry, because I want to see where he ends up playing in the defense, whether it's more of a defensive back nickel position or maybe even an undersized linebacker in certain formations.
Love that.
Yeah, man. This was such a blast, Ryan. We're going to need to get you on here in the offseason. We got a lot to talk about going forward. You're the man, dude. Keep killing it with everything you're doing, and we just look forward to your takes and your sources, because I know when you tweet those eyeball emojis out, something's about to be brewing, no pun intended, UCLA. Ryan, you're the man, dude. Thank you so much for coming on. Bruin Bible, we are officially out. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Bruin Bible channel here on YouTube.